Bolton player here for you all in our backup match. This is going to be Collins Mullen versus Steven Bowers. Steven on Bolton here, going to start things off. We're playing a take flight. We're charging our soul with, maybe, is that a sensor? I can't quite tell. But we're going to come in with 4 with go again. We've critically on this first turn charged our soul. What we need to do if we're Bolton here, get that soul nice and big. And we're playing double hatchets. Hatchet. What's going on, Ponkage?
Steven's saying, you know what, I've played lots of Monarch Draft, and I love these weapons, and I'm just going to play them in CC as well.
Okay, so we've got a take flight going into a down and dirty that's not even headed to the arsenal. We're just throwing out 6 at this Icelander player. We're saying, you got 2 blocks? Because I'm trying to get some damage across. Because I think that down and dirty might have been able to defend, but now we're throwing it out.
So just to catch folks up here, we have switched over to our backup game, but we are starting from minute 0, and we're just playing it at a sped up play so we can get to live as soon as we can.
Absolutely. So it looks like Collins now just going to go ahead and draw 4. I'm so curious about that down and dirty attack. We'll talk about it later. This is going to be a Tunic going to 1. We've seen Emeritus Scolding in the hand. It looks like a Frost Hex. Going to be most likely just a blue block 3. But now you have to imagine Collins staring down this Bolton deck, seeing what we just saw in the hatchets, seeing the down and dirty. He's probably reassessing his life as well. Like, what exactly am I facing? We're starting things off here, though. It's a pretty good turn 1. We've got an Aether Ice Vein fused with that Frost Hex. Another card potentially going to be donated to the Waning Moon. This looks like a red, so this is 5 damage. We're going to AB. Looks like we can AB just the 1 and then spend the other 2 on the trigger, and then taking the rest of that 4 damage going to 36.
Absolutely. And now coming back to a down and dirty block, I think at this point you're unsure whether the Icelander is on Arcane or on Physical.
Absolutely. So it could get stuck there.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
If they don't send a physical attack at you, if they don't send a physical attack at you, it'll just get stuck there, and you definitely don't want to stuck Arsenal when you're against an Icelander.
We've seen that even at the World Championships. We've seen an Arsenal get stuck against an Icelander.
Absolutely. That's Sink Below. Oh. Brutal. Now the Bolton's equipment over here, they're running Spell Void 2 with Halo of Illumination here. Null Rune 1 with the Null Rune Gloves, and that lets them do plays like this, where you AB 1 on the Ice Vein and use your 2 floating to pay for the effect. And the other thing is a Soulborn Resolve. Now this is a very, very interesting interaction against Wizards, because it does not put any trigger on the stack. So the moment you charge your Soul, Soulborn Resolve, every time you take damage, Soulborn Resolve checks whether you have charged this turn. And it says, if you have, I'm going to prevent 1 of it. And there's no trigger for Icelander to respond to say, oh, before the Soulborn Resolve is active, I'm going to deal damage to you. Because the charge was an additional cost, and every time you take damage, Soulborn Resolve is going to check.
Oh, wow.
So, yes. So that is
a sneaky way to maybe just make, I am preventing damage and there's nothing you can do about it.
Absolutely. And that kind of offsets a little bit of what makes this matchup difficult for Bolton, which is they cannibalize cards out of their own hand.
Yeah.
Oftentimes. They get value out of it later, but early on they sort of, pay the extra cost of losing a whole card to put into the Soul. But Soulborn Resolve tells them, because you did that, you're going to prevent at least 1 damage.
Yeah.
And if you have any floating, like what we have here, you get to use that to prevent damage too. And so you do sort of offset a little bit.
So he's pointing to the Soulborn Resolve here, potentially for that damage effect right now. Yeah, they're talking about it. So is it a consistent effect, or is it just...
Yeah, so the way it works, actually, is that technically it's going to trigger every single time you take damage. So even on the opponent's turn, when they send an attack at you and you take damage, it's going to trigger. It's going to ask, have you charged this turn? If you have, I'm going to prevent 1 of this damage that's coming in.
Yeah, so we're going to talk more about the Soulbound Resolve. We do have a V of the Vanguard here coming in 4/4. We charged a card now, 2 floating that could potentially be going into a hatchet each, but critically that 1 Frostbite from the Icelander here going to make that first hatchet cost you 2, or you're going to make the attack reaction cost 1, so then you only have 1 more left over for only 1 hatchet here. Those hatchets, as we know from Monarch Draft, get better when you use them in concert with each other. So just the 1 Frostbite there off the Cold Snap really mattering on a V of the Vanguard turn, turning what would have been a much more damaging turn into just 8.
Absolutely.
Or just 7, maybe? After it's going to be 3? Probably 3.
3 because of the V of the Vanguard buff. Just to clarify myself, it's not every time you take damage, but the first time you take damage each turn. Soulbound Resolve is going to ask you, have you charged?
Yeah. But that is a massive thing against an Icelander. If you're able to charge, that's 1 damage prevention just sitting in your chest piece every single turn. That's amazing.
Every time you charge, absolutely. And the critical thing of not putting a trigger on the stack is very, very relevant, because we've seen what Icelanders do against Dromai, for example. Dromai says, oh, you've put an arcane damage on the stack, I'm going to respond with Furnace. And then Icelander says, I'm going to respond to your Furnace with this Waning Moon before you get the resources from your Furnace.
Yeah.
There is no priority window like that for Soulbound Resolve. It's just saying, hey, first time you're taking damage, have you charged? I'm preventing 1 of it.
Fascinating. So we do have the Aether Ice Vein coming in here. We have it fused again, so more damage being taken. We again just pitched the blue Glint the Quicksilver. This is a fantastically interesting Bolton deck for us all to get to watch. What a treat. That Glint the Quicksilver going to AB the 1, pay the 2 off the Aether Ice Vein. Let's see how Steven, with this unique take on Bolton, wants to continue. He is currently 2-0 here at round 3 of the National Championships here in Las Vegas, sitting at 28 to Collins' 31. So not much has happened yet in terms of huge swings in this game. Going to see which player is able to really establish more of a critical advantage piece, be it that a permanent from the Icelander's position, be it a big spike turn, a Lumina, something powerful out of the Bolton that forces the cards out of the Icelander's hand. We're just kind of trading some things back and forth here. Going to be interesting to see which player is able to kind of make that first critical blow.
And critically, Steven not happy about this, but Collins fused that Aether Ice Vein with the Channel Lake Frigid.
Yeah. So, hey, talk about a critical piece.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a bit of a board piece, right?
Yeah.
A temporary, but board piece that really, really cripples Bolton, because as we talked about earlier, Bolton does cannibalize his own hand. And if you cannibalize your own hand, you don't have resources to pitch for stuff like Channel Lake Frigid.
Yeah.
Now, of course, Collins doesn't have the Tunic up here, so he's probably hoping that he can hold the Channel Lake Frigid for one more turn, get the Tunic to 3, play that Channel Lake Frigid, and be able to activate Tunic Waning Wind for 3. But let's see whether he responds.
Because this is a big this is a big card. This is a card you want to respond to. Spill Blood going to give Axes this turn +2 and Dominate. That's going to immediately buy the Channel Lake Frigid out of arsenal for Collins. Not only representing the Frostbite, going to represent the tax on the rest of the turn. There's a blue floating or 2 floating off of that Illuminate down there in the pitch. But it looks as though we are just going to say, yep, that's all good. Let the Frostbite resolve, immediately pay into it, spend an additional 2, so that's an entire 3 resources for that Hatchet. It's going to be 5 with Dominate, but because the Channel Lake Frigid, unfortunately, that's the end of the turn.
Absolutely. And once again, Bolton...
Or 4 with Dominate, excuse me.
Another one of those heroes, a little bit like Lexi, where they do need to do a lot of actions to actually present more attacks. So you talked about this earlier, to even activate Bolton, to even get the go again, you need to activate an attack reaction. That's going to get taxed by Channel Lake Frigid. And then you swing the weapon. That's going to get taxed by Channel Lake Frigid. Similar to Lexi, right?
Yeah.
They need a Voltaire to get the go again, and then that's going to get taxed by Channel Lake Frigid. So it's going to be quite difficult for Steven to go wide while the Channel Lake Frigid is on the board. Let's see whether he can prevent enough damage. Now, with just AB1, it could be tough, but, let's see. If Collins ends up sending some physical attacks, like the E-Strike he just blocked with, that could be ways that Steven can, prevent some damage to his life total to wait out this Channel Lake Frigid.
And critically, Collins there, because the Bolton player hadn't charged, able to block with that attack action, knowing that the Bolton wasn't going to trigger and bump up the attack, taking the time to block with an attack action when he knew this was a safe time to do it. This is a Spill Blood's turn, not a Via the Vanguard, not a Take Flight, not a charge attack turn, utilizing that opportunity to block with the attack action rather than on a charge turn when Bolton can get that value.
Also, very importantly, E-Strike's one of those cards that actually has a bit of anti-synergy with Channel Lake Frigid, because you do want to pitch to keep the Channel Lake Frigid around. Now, if you go E-Strike, that goes straight to the bottom of the deck, and you wouldn't keep the channel around. So Colin's saying, I'm going to block this E-Strike and just Coronet Peak you. Even though E-Strike for 7 is technically higher value, the Coronet Peak lets him keep the channel around, which is very, very critical against Bolton, as we've already talked about. And something Steven doesn't know yet, but he's definitely going to be unhappy when he finds out, is Collins put another Channel Lake Frigid in his arsenal over there. So it's going to be a bit of a cold night for Steven, for a few cold nights for Steven for a while.
We're in sunny Las Vegas, but the feature match is frozen solid. Now, we do have a no block in Collins' hand there. We can see the Heart of Findall. That's not going to be able to get any value here because Collins is sitting at 30. That is a no block, but
also Blizzard.
Also, so 2 no blocks, so we're only able to donate 2 cards, and if that's an Insidious Chill, that's also a 2 block, or that's a 2 block, and I think that might be a red attack.
A
Wounded Bull, so that's another 2 block.
This is massive.
Wow, this is actually huge, so we might have to, how is he going to want to have to deal with this right now? We might have to throw the Channel Lake Frigid out just so it's not destroyed, but you don't want to do that on a turn. It's not going to get any value. This is perfect for Collins to just, all he's doing is pitching a blue. That's not that big for Channel Lake Frigid. We're not going to use that resource anyway. So this is a huge command and conquer here for Steven at a critical juncture. It's going to buy the Channel Lake Frigid on a turn that Collins isn't happy about throwing it out.
Exactly, and it's even before the Command and Conquer deals damage, so he doesn't even get the life gain from the Heart of Findall.
Yep.
Yep, absolutely. But he does get the Tunic into Moon, as we talked about earlier. He does get that value. Now, Steven, of course, is holding on a card. Let's see whether he chooses to block this all. He does not. And now Collins probably forced to just eat this entire 6 because he's still left with that no-block Blizzard in hand, two blocks. So
yeah, I think it's a Scar for Scar, not a Wounded Bull, but still,
it is a Scar.
Still a 2-block nonetheless. And just like we said, Collins going to have to take that 6, heading on down to 24. So, Steven, there's an earthquake on the other side of the arena. Those Channel Lake Frigids are just tectonic plates crashing into each other as the feature match takes a little bit of a bump. But we got two Channel Lake Frigids. Only one of them is going to be able to stick around after a coronet peak here, and this is going to be a scar for a scar. But hey, we got go again because we're lower life.
So this is actually really, really interesting. I really want to shout out Colin's play earlier. What you could have done is let the Command and Conquer hit you, go lower than your opponent, and then respond to the on-hit trigger of Command and Conquer, pitching the Heart of Findall, and since you're lower, you would gain that 1 life. However, Collins chose not to do that because he wants to stay lower than the opponent for the Scar for a Scar to get go again, and I love that little interaction. Love that he recognized that he could have responded to CNC hit trigger, pitch Heart of Findall, get value from that, but then he would lose out value on the Scar for a Scar.
Yeah.
So he's saying, nope, I'm just going to forego the Heart of Findall value. Scar and peak, and critically, this keeps around that second Channel Lake Frigid, which he was forced to play out, but he still has a CLF out while keeping life parity with the Bolton.
Absolutely. It's very you can greedily look at a Heart of Findall and think, I want that 1 point of value for pitching a random blue card. But then when you look at the value he gains from a 4 with go again into the coronet peak that keeps around Channel Lake Frigid, I think that's a wonderful point. That is a significantly higher upside play, higher value play. So Collins here sitting at 2-0, showing why he is doing so well on this deck. Now, how is Steven going to try to fight through a second Channel Lake Frigid in a row? It does look like he's representing a Courage token, but I don't know if he...
From a Banneret, I believe.
From he could charge a Banneret?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll miss the Banneret there. This one's just going to be the Hatchet of Mind coming in, breaking the Courage token. So it's going to come in for just 3 natural. No go again. We do have the Bolton ability online because of that Courage token, but this is just going to be 3 damage. How's Colin want to deal with it? We saw Glint the Quicksilver. Maybe there are attack reactions in this list.
Yeah, that Glint the Quicksilver will need to be in Arsenal for him to be able to use it because the Channel Lake Frigid is still around. And we talked about this earlier. If he wants to activate Bolton to make full use of his Courage token, which is what it's there in the deck for, he would need to pay 1 to activate Bolton and then pay another 2 to attack with a Hatchet. Colin's saying, you know what? I'm not even going to let you do that. I'm not even going to give you the option. I'm going to put this Frostbite on you right now. So even if you have a blue, it's going to cost 4 for you to activate Bolton and swing the Hatchet. So Colin's saying, I just took 3 damage to develop a full Insidious Chill, and now I'm making immediate use out of it, sending this Aether Ice Vein at you.
Oh my goodness! So the Channel Lake Frigid there, we were like, oh wow, Channel Lake Frigid. Not when you want to use Channel Lake Frigid. That Channel Lake Frigid bought Collins a turn which was just a Hatchet. Collins used that low pressure turn to develop the Insidious Shield. We're not taking a lot of damage. We can easily develop an Insidious Shield. The immediate follow-up on the very next turn is an Aether Ice Vein Fuse, so everything coming up Collins here, as this damage is going to represent an Insidious Shield trigger. It's going to represent arcane damage, a secondary discard or pay trigger, and then we've got another card being parked in that arsenal. What was the Fuse?
Well, yeah, so he's pitching it over here to keep the Channel Lake Frigid
looks
around.
like
It's 2 ice cards there. He's saying, you know what, Aether Hail and Arsenal not as valuable as keeping a Channel Lake Frigid around for a second turn. Once again, we come back to the way Bolton plays. Collins has already forced out 2 cards from Bolton. Now, if Bolton wants to... Now, Bolton just physically cannot charge. I guess if the Arsenal card is a charge card, they could, but they can't get a lot of value out of it because they don't... they won't be able to give it go again and actually go wide enough. So Colin's saying, I'm going to opt to just keep the Channel Lake around and just freeze you out.
Yeah, and once again, this is just now... We don't got a Courage token this turn. It's just going to be Hatchet of Mind for 2. So like we're saying, this is 2 damage. Now, both of these players, Stephen Bauer sitting at 20 life, Collins at the 21. Again, the game looks even, but until Icelander is dead and buried, you don't want to be at parity with this deck. This is 2 damage coming in now. What is Collins going to be able to do on his own turn? He's bought himself, again, an incredibly low-pressure turn. We're going to buy an Aether Ice Vein block if we're the Bolton player here. So 3 cards. We definitely got 2 red attacks. So one of them is going to have to be spent here. Looks like without the... without that Aether Ice Vein, we're only going to be able to pay for 1 of them, and it's just going to be a big old Wounded Bull. But because, hey, for the first time we're at a life advantage, this is going to be coming in for 7.
Which is really interesting. You're like, oh, yes, Icelander's higher than me, so the Wounded Bull doesn't get value. But then then it sinks in, oh, wait, the Icelander's higher than me. Oh, no, this is not where I want to be. So Wounded Bull only coming in for 7 here. Now, of course, Steven doesn't know this, but it looks like Collins arsenaling another red here. So 1 turn of reprieve.
Yeah.
Steven doesn't know about this. Now, of course, Collins could draw into a Blizzard, which is one of those critical ways that Collins could disrupt from hand when they don't have a disruption in Arsenal. But let's see how... Okay, Soul Shield. Pretty good.
But we do have to overpitch to the Soul Shield because of the Channel Lake Frigid.
Because Channel Lake Frigid is still around. It's going to get destroyed at the end of this turn, but if you want to play a D-React, you still need to pay extra right now.
I mean, listen, you're happy to save 6 life, but again, now Steven has no way of knowing that that's a red attack in Collins' arsenal there, so he doesn't know he has the reprieve on this turn from crazy tax effects, but this would have been the first time that we could see something major happen. However, talk about a major moment.
Lumina's
this is a
pretty
Lumina
major.
Ascension.
Yep.
Lumina Ascension's got a lot of text. It's going to do a lot of things, but firstly, we've got a Hatchet of Body coming in. I believe it's getting the buff from the Lumina Ascension, so it's going to be coming in for 3. Every time an attack hits this turn, we're going to look at the top card of our deck. If it's light, put it into the soul and gain a life, or just put it in the soul, and then if it's light, gain a life, right? Something like that.
Yes.
You said yes.
Critically, Steven has not charged this turn, so he doesn't get the additional benefit from Lumina, which allows him to attack additional times with his weapon this turn. So it's just going to be 1 hatchet each, which he will get the Valiant Dynamos. The Valiant Dynamos back, which is relevant. We have seen Collins, being on the Bull Lander list. He's sending physical attacks. But, of course, the Lumina not coming for 100% of his value here.
Got you. So, and we are going to get all 4 block out of the Icelander opponent here. The Iron Rock Gauntlet being donated to the cause. So for one of the first times, we're really getting to see the hatchets work in concert here, taking that -1 defense counter off of the Valiant Dynamo. Like you said, that's a point of life gained off of that attack, a 7 damage turn. Some of the best we've seen from Steven. We're probably going to be able to spend that Valiant Dynamo block right here on a big old Wounded Bull. Once again, only for 7. Small victories. But we're going to see how does Steven, immediately going to go ahead and throw the Valiant Dynamo onto the block. How else does he want to do so? Looks like it's another soul shield. So we're covering him entirely, keeping our life total pretty high.
Yep. And I do want to shout out Collins' Iron Rod block there. Very, very critical. Now, Bolton, now one of his decks, like Levia, not too many on-hits going around. And Lumina is one of the few, though.
Yeah.
If that had hit, it would have been 1 more card in soul, potentially a life gain as well. Collins saying, you know what, I'm going to cash in my Iron Rod here to stop that before you get value from his Lumina on hits. And now Celestial Cataclysm coming out here. All those early charges, all those early cannibalizing of the hands really paying off here. This is a 1-card 7.
Yeah.
That's,
E-Strike at home. I mean, E-Strike is Celestial Cataclysm at home.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it has going.
Yeah.
Collins out there doing his 2-card 7s with his Wounded Bulls not being charged up. And Steven saying, you know what? 1-card 7, deal with this, Icelander.
Yeah, so here we go. This is 7 damage on the stack. Now, in response, we're going to get a Polar Blast out of the arsenal representing a Frostbite token. So it's going to be really interesting to see on this turn if that Frostbite, how relevant is it going to be? Because if that's like a 0-cost attack, that's the end of the turn then from Steven. But if we're just going to try to power up the hatchets with the blue, we have no soul, so we might have trouble getting the go again on this turn from this moment forward. But Steven going to keep the card in his hand after the AB potential. Going down to 16 is the Bolton player here, and the Icelander player, Collins Mullen, looking like he's going to donate a card to the block, because 7 damage is a lot, even at 21. You don't want to necessarily take 7 to the face unless you've got really good reason.
Absolutely. Ooh, blocking with a 2-block here, so potentially, even more reds clumping up in Collins' hand here. So definitely not happy blocking with the Fighting Spirit and not getting a life gain out of it.
Yeah.
Steven looking like he's going to arsenal that last card, which makes sense because not only does he not have soul to give a hatchet go again, the hatchet wouldn't even be buffed to even have the potential of give and go again with Bolton's hero ability. So opting to arsenal, took that full Waning Moon 3 damage to get this arsenal.
Yeah, so a Wounded Bull now. Once again, parity. Life totals are equal.
Yeah.
This is just a Wounded Bull for 7. We're playing fair flesh and blood over here, folks. This is going to be 7 damage. Again, trading 7s, right? It's been 7, 7, 7 for a couple turns. Now, Steven looking like there's just 1 card going into Arsenal. We don't know what that is if we're the Bolton player here. Steven staring down the 7 attack. Doesn't have any soul critically, so now has to find an opportunity, like we said, to put cards into the soul. We might be seeing that here after a 3-card block, maybe just thinking, I got to get some cards in my soul, or just attack with some things, but those 3 cards going to be donated to the cause. Steven really, really showing a propensity to keep his life total high, knowing the kind of deck he's facing down.
Absolutely. And Colin over there pitched an Emeritus Scolding with Tunic up at 3. Now that, alongside with the 2-block that he did, I think probably signaled to Steven that Collins potentially did not arsenal a blue, because Emeritus Scolding, when you have Tunic up at 3 and your opponent's at 16, very, very strong arsenal.
Absolutely.
And also you don't want to be blocking a Fighting Spirit like this.
Yeah.
So likely Steven probably noticed, okay, Colin maybe stuck on a few too many reds, probably had to arsenal a red, saying, I'm going to be safe if I block out your physical attack and not really keep my defenses up for my own turn, because you probably don't have an arcane spell any sort of blue spell in your arsenal, and that's exactly what we see. It's
Yeah.
Fighting Spirit in arsenal. So very, very good heads-up play from Steven, then realizing that Collins probably wasn't going to threaten any damage on his own turn, saying, I'm going to block you out, I'm going to keep my life total high, exactly like what we were talking
Yeah,
about.
absolutely. This is that was an Illuminate on Steven's turn, threatening to go to Soul on hit, a 0 for 4. That was blocked out by Collins, so responding now is Collins with the Findall's Fighting Spirit. Once again, another big ol' 7 attack. We're going to take 1 damage if we're the Bolton player here. Findall's Fighting Spirit connecting for just 1. 1 card going into Arsenal there for Collins. Now it's time to charge a little bit because we've got to take flight. We've got a card going to Soul. We've got 2 floating. Collins, you got a Frostbite for me, or am I going to get to come in with some hatchets?
2 floating and Soulbound Resolve is active, so the first arcane damage thing Collins does will get 1 damage prevented no matter what.
Yeah, super relevant. We haven't gotten to see it too often because Collins has done such a good job of taxing the Bolton player out of being able to keep enough cards to charge, but it's a really interesting mechanic. I'm glad to know of it if I ever play as or against that hero as an arcane damage dealer. We're going to see Collins looks like he is going to find a Frostbite here that is an Aether Hail, so it's 2 damage, but critically on the turn it's a Frostbite, which means it's not going to be more than just 1 hatchet after this. We're probably not going to have to spend Soul to do so, but we're going to go ahead and block both of the, or just one of the arcane, or both. Did he pay the 1?
Yes, he paid 1, and then the other one is again eaten up by the Soulbound Resolve. So he still has 1 floating for the Waning Moon. Definitely not going to be using it for Hatchet because of the Frostbite. He just physically isn't able to.
Yeah.
So 1 floating, he's just signaling to Collins, if you Waning Moon me, at most it's going to leak 2.
Yeah, interesting. So yeah, definitely deciding to keep 1 point of life total to himself rather than representing an attack for just 2. That's not that impressive. You know, it's much better if you're able to go 2 into 3, utilize those resources in that way. But if you're just going to swing the attack for 2, you might as well, I guess, Steven deciding to keep his life total as high as possible again because Collins, as an Icelander player, they can just blow you up.
Yep.
So really utilizing those soul shields, utilizing the AB every time he can, trying to keep himself up as high as possible, going down to 13. Now this is going to activate the Bolton ability because that take flight that would have been... if it's the yellow, then it's just 3, but that's going to go up to 4 because of the Command and Conquer block. Bolton saying if you've charged and your attack is defended by an attack action card, it's going to get bumped up by 1.
And that is very, very rare against Icelander. Icelander very typically will block you with their non-attacks, a lot of which block 3, stuff like Meritus Scolding, Frost Texas, Ice-Eternal, Frostings, the list goes on. There's tons of non-attack block 3, so very, very rare that Steven could get the buff from the Bolton hero ability by Icelander blocking with an attack, but we did see that happen here. Got some value out of it. And Collins showing exactly why he's following up with an E-Strike saying, yep, I just had a bunch of attacks. So, honestly, Collins, a slight unfortunate streak of hands here. We've seen him clump into quite a few red attacks.
That might have been an Emeritus Scolding that he just flashed the camera, though. I couldn't quite tell, but that could have been the premier Arsenal target for a damage-dealing spell that is in your blue slot. This this Enlightened Strike going to go ahead and be blocked by 2 cards. We've got an Engulfing Light charging the Soul. If it hits, it itself is going to go to Soul. Yeah, Collins, go ahead and check that out. I've been studying my Monarch cards, and I know you have too, my brother.
And it looks like charged with a Banneret of Gallantry over here, hence creating the Quicken token.
Absolutely.
And Soulbound Resolve attack is active, so if Collins does decide to Emeritus into tuning Waning Moon, it'll leak a total of 6, which is still a lot.
Still a lot, and potentially now Emeritus in the Arsenal is the way you get the absolute highest ceiling turns out of an Icelander kill turn. You have to have the red Aether Ice Fan, you have to have the blue Emeritus in your Arsenal, and then the Waning Moon on top of that for a total of 12. But you do... That is your ticket to ride, so to speak, is having the Emeritus in the Arsenal. So he is just going to go ahead and throw it out here, saying, I can find different damage at different times. We do see an Ice Bolt. That's pretty good as well. This is going to be 4 damage plus 3 more, 7 total damage against a player that has nothing floating, is going to send Steven on down to 7 there after the 1 damage prevention like you've been talking about on that Soulbound Resolve. So Steven heading on down to 7. A precarious life total, but doing a good job of applying as much pressure as he can in the face of all this disruption.
Absolutely. And now Collins will be able to Arsenal Blue Aether Hail, which is...
I think it's an Ice Bolt, I think.
I think he bottomed that with the E-Strike.
Got you.
Because he already used the Tunic for the Emeritus, so it's... You don't necessarily want to be forced into going off in case you draw a bad hand. So you Arsenal the Aether Hail. With 1 blue, you get to send 5. Obviously, Bolt gives you a higher ceiling, but if you draw a couple too many reds, you want to just leave that Bolt in there. Like you don't want to be forced into playing the Bolt. Aether Hail, just a bit more of a safer Arsenal target. So I definitely do like this Arsenal choice from Collins over here.
Absolutely. So an Enlightened Strike coming in for 7. Now, critically, we've seen a lot of, you said it, like unfortunate red attacks being clumped together, but I do want to point some attention to the fact that Collins is playing pretty much the whole suite of red attacks. In the Icelander days of yore, you didn't necessarily also have you didn't like have Scar for Scar, Command and Conquer, Enlighten Strike, Fighting Spirit, and Wounded Bull. Those are 5 different, that's 15, red cards in the list that Collins is representing at least close to that amount, and that does lead to a lot of those draws with the multiple red hands. Without an E-Strike to help smooth those things over, it can be pretty clunky, and Collins definitely still putting himself pretty much in the driver's seat, but playing all of the attack actions is definitely, a conscious choice from the Icelander player.
Yeah, and we saw Majinbei do the same thing as well. So at least during the Salt Lake Brawl event, he was on that many attack actions as well. I was very surprised to see 3 CNCs on top of Bulls and Fighting Spirits. Yeah. And just now, I don't believe we saw any CNCs when you saw him on stream, but wouldn't be surprised if he still has those in his list.
Now, Steven there having to pitch a card into the Oasis Respite, gaining a life, but it looks as though we're just passing priority with 1 card in hand. So what is Collins able to go ahead and muster up here? We're definitely going to throw some damage because with Steven at 8, there is a lot of arcane damage that can close this game out. So we're going to see how much pitch can we buy from Steven here. It looks like the answer is 0. We're taking 5, going down 2-3. Do we have anything else in hand? We have an Ice Bolt. Do we want to commit the Storm Striders here? It looks like the answer might be no.
So we don't want to forget the Spell Void 2 on the Halo of Illumination. So Steven looks like he's at 3, but he's actually secretly at 5.
Yeah.
And so, perhaps his out here is trying to bait Collins into using Striders. Maybe Collins forgets the Spell Void 2, and then suddenly Collins doesn't have Striders up, and maybe that could be a way back in again. But Collins, way too disciplined Icelander play. He's saying, you know what? Fine, if you're going to do that, I'm just going to send a Scourge. Doesn't have go again. It doesn't matter. You're at 3. It's fine. I'll just reset Arsenal. I'm just going to keep just using my Arsenal to leak damage into you. You only have AB1, so even my Ice Bolt is going to leak damage. Every time I Moon, it's going to leak damage. You're going to have to pop the Spell Void eventually, and then I can go for my Striders play. Or if I have Striders lethal, even through your Spell Void.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about forgetting the Halo of Illumination, you can't forget about the Halo of Illumination. What are we doing? That's what I was doing. That Halo of Illumination is going to go ahead and give 2 just instant damage prevention without any pitch required. So Collins here basically saying, I'm going to keep, like you said, throwing damage. Here's physical. You want to leak 1? Looks like the answer might be yes. Command and Conquer going to go ahead and be committed to the blocking cause here, sending Steven down 2-2. Arsenal going to occur from Collins. This is going to be a dangerous position to be in.
And now with his Ice Bolt, Collins actually has lethal without even Striders, because Ice Bolt comes in for 3. You can use Halo and AB1 to cover that completely, but then Waning Moon comes in for 3, and you only have AB1 remaining, and you are at 2. So let's see whether Steven maybe has drawn into another Oasis Respite. We did see him use one earlier. That could be an out he has, but other than that, this is 2 instances of 3 Arcane. You only have Spell Void 2 for one of them, AB1 for the other one when you're at 2 life. This is not looking very good. Let's see whether Steven's able to... Let's see what Steven's able to do.
Yeah, so he's going to go ahead and cash in the Halo of Illumination. Going to give the 2 Spell Void up. So 1 damage potentially leaking through. And if we have charge, which it looks like we have, because the Soulbound Resolve must have gone ahead and gotten in front of the way. We do have the Oasis Respite. So this is going to gain life. It's going to prevent the damage off the Waning Moon. Do we have a way to Striders in a kill here? We have a Frosting. And is that a Polar Blast?
So
the answer is maybe no.
Yeah, with 1 floating as well, Collins would need to send 4 Arcane Damage, so yellow or red Ice Vein. Or Emeritus. Looks like he didn't quite get that, but critically he didn't need to use Striders for that. So this is really just a little bit of delaying the inevitable rather than actually, potentially winning out the game. And here we see what we talked about earlier, Collins blocking with a non-attack, a 3-block non-attack, not even getting the Bolt ability. Steven's not going to be able to use that final 1 resource to even swing a hatchet because the attack was not buffed.
Alrighty, so Steven here going to go ahead and draw back up to 4. Collins, I think, still has that Polar Blast in his hand, which is going to be committed to the Arsenal, going to represent a card back in hand, getting more potentials to find a damage-dealing spell. We can see an Emeritus in the hand there, and that's probably just going to be the game unless we're worried about a 3rd Oasis Respite, which, again, we've seen 2. You have to imagine we're going to see more. We're just throwing it all out there, though, for the Bolton player here. Here's Via the Vanguard coming in for a bunch. We're going to go ahead and throw a Frostbite on the stack with the Polar Blast, draw a card. We've got Blues for days. Here's a Waning Moon coming in. This is going to be AB1,
with the Soulbound Resolve as well, so you can prevent 2 of it and go down to 2, but then Collins has the Emeritus, which is guaranteed lethal. And it looks like Steven didn't even AB it. He knew it was over. He just said, all right, just kill me. Just get me out of this misery. I've been frozen for long enough. Just get me out of this.
This is going to be the game there. Steven